Welcome to the Royal Aeronautical Society. I am Nicholas DeSantis, President of Gold Mercury International. Today is a special day for aviation, as we are gathered here to honor Giovanni and to present his great new book, Shaking the Skies. He's an iconic figure in the industry. Giovanni also will be available later to sign his books. And of course, I will be one of the first people that wants to get one, Giovanni. And I'm going to introduce now Simon Laxmore, CEO of the Royal Aeronautical Society, to say a few words. I would like also to ask the audience to turn their cell phones to silent as we're recording the event. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Nicholas, and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Royal Aeronautical Society. I thought I might just say a few words about the Society. Some of you may well be members, many of you may have been here before, but just to make a few comments for the benefit of those who are visiting us for the first time. The Royal Aeronautical Society was founded in 1866, and so you will work out that in 2016 will be 150 years. And of course, in those days, it was founded on the background of activity in ballooning, so we go back that far. Our patron is Her Majesty the Queen, and we are the global learned society for the aerospace aviation industry with 18,271 members as of this morning, I can tell you, and several hundred corporate partners. So we are a learned body. We don't lobby, we hold major events, and we hold conferences on a whole range of subjects on an annual basis. Now, a little bit about this building. This building was in fact built in 1906-107 for the princely sum of £50,000. And it was, prior to this, it was the park keeper's house for the parks, and previous residents on this site included the Duke of Wellington and a whole range of bankers up until 1906, including the Baring brothers come the end. Since then, it was in private ownership until 1939, when we moved in here, and so we've been here since 1939. And you'll notice by the style of the building that it is, in fact, for those of you who regularly have tea in the Ritz, that it is styled after the Ritz, which was built a year before in 1905, 1906. So that's a little bit about the Society and the building. Well, I had a phone call some weeks ago from my good friend Giovanni, who said, can I have lunch with you? And it's never a problem having lunch with me, and especially not for Giovanni, because if you can have lunch with Giovanni, first of all, you have marvelous food and you can listen to some wonderful stories. So that wasn't the issue, and I knew he had a question to ask me, and that was about this evening. And I can't tell you how delighted I am to host this event tonight. Giovanni, of course, a huge figure in the industry, has been a fellow of the Society for many years, and we are absolutely delighted here at the Society to host this event this evening. Now, I just have one comment to make, and it's just a small gift from me to Giovanni. First of all, if he tells you that you have got the #1 copy of his book, you haven't, because I've got it, all right? Okay? I've got it, and it's upstairs, and it's staying there. Number 2, you'll notice on the front of the book that he's wearing a tie, and he's wearing the same tie tonight. Now, the deal I have with Giovanni, and he agreed, is that every time he comes to this building in future, he wears a Society tie, and here it is.
Thank you, Simon. Giovanni, what can I say? We worked together for 2 years at Opodo, and I can say that I know you very well. Opodo began as a total travel startup and has now become one of the most visited travel sites in the world and a market leader in the UK, France, and Germany. Thanks to you, Giovanni, reaching revenues of 1.5 billion euros per year. That for a startup on the web is quite remarkable. The speed of the internet the technology challenges we faced in transforming travel distribution, managing also the giant expectations of our many airline shareholders, the many Italian dinners, Giovanni, also that we had at 1 in the morning. It wasn't 9 o'clock, it was 1 in the morning, always would be a testament to that great friendship. During that crazy journey, we could read each other's thoughts, and maybe even in Italian, I think. It was a journey that I know you and I will never forget, and we developed a great friendship, and I know it will last forever. Giovanni, and I also want to thank two very important people that are here tonight, both our wives, Melissa and Elena, because they really put up with those long hours and long days. So I want to thank them for that. Now, in every great life, Giovanni, there is a moment that comes to define you, and I think that moment of crisis that forced you to dig deep and establish who you really are came for you on September 11th, 2001. We were together that day, and a call came from American Airlines to advise us that one of their aircrafts had crashed into one of the Twin Towers. Turning the TV on, we watched that day in horror as the two towers collapsed and other planes crashed in the Pentagon and in the fields of Pennsylvania. We did not sleep that night as we understood what this would mean for the world and for an airline-owned travel startup. We were asking people to enjoy traveling and flying the world, and we could not do that anymore during those weeks. So as the marketing and sales director of Opodo, I realized with you that we had to radically change our strategy if we were to survive what came to be the total collapse of air travel in the following months. I also knew what you were thinking that day, what to do now, what is next for the industry, what can I do for the industry. 2 weeks later, you received a phone call from the Delta Airlines CEO, Leo Mullins, who was then chairman of IATA. He asked you to join the organization and revive the industry. Most large US airlines had filed for Chapter 11 and nobody wanted to fly. In fact, we couldn't even pay people to fly during those days. If you were to become the CEO of IATA, you had one non-negotiable condition: to have total operational autonomy. A condition that would give you the freedom to do what had to be done. The monumental task of leading and transforming an industry going through its worst period in history. IATA in the early 2000s was, as Giovanni explains in his book, a dusty cave, dark and full of creatures afraid of the light of day. It was a bureaucratic organization. And despite this metaphorical Lord of the Rings type picture, Giovanni saw the crisis and the challenges as an opportunity, and the restructuring required as a chance to forever change the aviation industry for the better. Giovanni has an incredible business career and has worked in many sectors. To name just a few of his roles, he led Alitalia Airlines as CEO and helped internationalize the Italian industrial giant IRI, as well as working with his close friend and mentor, Jack Welch, at GE. Now, there are many reasons why Gold Mercury, the global governance and visionary leadership think tank that I lead, wanted to co-publish this book. But these are the three fundamental ones, Giovanni. The first and most important reason is that this is an incredible business turnaround story that must be told. But not just of a single organization, but of an entire industry. A fundamental industry for the economy that we all use every day. Families and economies realized this in 2010 when the volcanic eruption in Iceland stopped all flights over Europe for weeks, affecting people, affecting goods and services all over the world. Most large US airlines Number two, it is a story of leadership and excellence in global governance at a time when there is none. Your job entailed managing diverse stakeholders with opposing agendas, including governments, airport operators, global corporations and airlines, but always seeking what was best for passengers. Passengers were always your number one priority. You managed to achieve consensus because of your honesty and determination. But you never allowed the lack of consensus to get in your way. You are a master diplomat and a master tactician. Your influence will be felt for decades in making global aviation successful. And the final reason is because we need more of you and quickly. Visionary and honest men that are pragmatic and determined and that get the job done. My secret plan tonight in this regard is to take some of your DNA, later today clone you, and use these Giovanni clones to make 1 or 2 European countries better managed, or maybe the whole of Europe, Giovanni. I could go all night praising you, but there are other speakers here today, and we are honored to celebrate with you the publication of this extraordinary memoir and leadership primer. With this work, you have documented the revolution you were hired to undertake at IATA and the monumental changes that occurred while you politely shouted your now famous catchphrase, "Basta," at the most powerful governments, world leaders, officials, and CEOs in the world. Or as 2 foreign interpreters understood it in one of your conferences, "Pasta" and "bastard." I now give the word to Robert Milton, former CEO of Air Canada, to tell us more about your great new book.
Thank you, Nicholas. I have to say that I'm amused by the fact that people that know Giovanni obviously speak to the same themes without having coordinated in advance on what they were going to say. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the launch of Shaking the Skies. I can attest firsthand to the fact that this book genuinely illuminates the realities of the IATA Giovanni found, transformed, and left. It's a book both a business person or an aviation person or an airline person will thoroughly enjoy. It points a spotlight as well on a trait that I've noticed that true agents of change look at and deal with issues like an existing paradigm. In recent years, I've had the good fortune to be a founding investor in startup companies alongside true visionaries like David Neilman, Tony Fernandez, and most recently, Steve Hazy. One absolutely fascinating characteristic they all have to their core is a total disinterest in what is not possible. Now, naturally, turning around and running a large industry body like IATA is not the same as starting a great new company. But this key attribute of disdain for what cannot be done is shared by Giovanni. In fact, as regards this feature, I do not believe he came with an on-off switch. But in my view, this trait, coupled with his drive and determination, have been key to Giovanni's success and is readily evident in Shaking the Skies. Also evident is the unbelievable energy expended by Giovanni as he tirelessly globetrotted pursuing change. In this quest, he was constantly on the road, which I'm not quite sure whether his lovely wife Elena, unquestionably a key feature in his success, and so often at his side at points around the world, was upset about or rejoiced at the opportunity to be able to relax in his absence. But it comes through clearly in his words. This wasn't about having a nice, high visibility job. This was about leading a crusade for change in an enormous but horribly underachieving industry, which, among other things, needed to learn to help itself by, as he coined, shouting politely. I remember my first IATA board meeting. It was PG, pre-Giovanni. Also probably appropriate in terms of the US nomenclature of a parental guidance movie, because IATA was in serious need of parental guidance. Thankfully, it was the only meeting without Giovanni, but I remember it as if it was yesterday, and it was surreal. We were at this board meeting in a fairly dimly lit room and listening to this endless presentation in an unbelievably boring monotone. seemingly no one wanting to interject anything, to interrupt with a question. No one wanted to slow the meeting down. I think no one wanted to miss their flight home or prolong the meeting a second. And as we got to the close, the then leader said, "Oh, and we've decided to recalibrate management wages both in Montreal and Geneva, and so we've used an expert firm on the subject, and they have used Geneva wages and cost of living indexes to determine how much people in Montreal and Geneva will receive in pay increases." Now, I was living in Montreal at the time, and I didn't want to delay the meeting's end either, but I had to put up my hand. I said, surely the cost of living and wages in Montreal are considerably lower than Geneva, and doing this will very inappropriately skew to the benefit of those in Montreal what they're compensated by. To which there was a silence, and people kind of looked down and shuffled their feet around, and the answer came, yes. And then we moved on, and the meeting ended. So that's what Giovanni walked into. But by our next meeting, Giovanni's first, it was truly palpable that change was in the air. As Shaking the Skies delves into, this was not only about getting an industry that made money for everybody in the food chain, but the airlines to stand up for itself and to do it with one voice, but this was also about efficiency. The push for efficiency not only included a radical restructuring of IATA's organization itself, including its people, systems, and facilities worldwide, but also included critical industry-wide pushes like e-ticketing and air traffic control optimization. Often in this story, that people needed to be led to a clearly correct place, even without a true consensus, and overcoming that word dreaded by so many, change, is apparent. No story could more clearly illustrate this than the section involving the end to paper tickets. Beyond leadership, though, another key Giovanni trait that comes through in Shaking the Skies is his capacity to say or shout what others only dare think. This comes out clearly in his stories of battling natural monopolies, like air traffic control operators and airport authorities on issues, especially runaway costs. In the case of Tokyo's Narita Airport, the color visuals of a hometown airline CEO making a sudden, unplanned overseas trip when Giovanni arrives to speak. And when he speaks, several rows of Japanese government officials getting up mid-speech and walking out of the room brings a smile to my face. But nothing like the chuckle in the case of one that was far closer to home for me, which was when Giovanni came to Canada to chastise the then Minister of Transport and the airport general manager at Toronto for the absurdity of their handling of our key Toronto hub's fiscal affairs. Giovanni proclaimed on a national morning TV show that he wanted to see them both gone. And true to form for Giovanni, within a few months, an election was called, and the Minister of Transport was gone, and not soon thereafter, the airport GM was gone, and sure enough, shortly thereafter, Narita Airport charges began to come down. With stories like this, you can't help but to love the fellow, and people do. I know the Milton family loves Giovanni, but I have a non-book story to relate that illustrates this. The Icelandic volcano eruption in 2010 had shut European airspace. We were at a very nice hotel in Hong Kong, and we couldn't get home, but we were trying, and we were coming up with all sorts of elaborate routings to get back. When my daughter, then 13, called out, "Look, it's Giovanni," as if Justin Bieber had just come onto the television. We hustled in to watch, and my wife let out a, "Giovanni, save us!" as if calling on Superman to intervene. Giovanni, standing on the perimeter, being interviewed at Heathrow Airport, ranted on screen about the silliness of the airport airspace closure. And the segment ended. But when it did, I have this funny feeling Giovanni ran into a phone booth, donned his super gear, flew up into the skies with a giant vacuum cleaner, and sucked all the volcanic dust out because, yet again, within 48 hours, we were on an airplane heading back to Europe. Folks, Giovanni is a man who will never need to worry about whether he made a difference, because he has, and he did it in an arena that affects our world. He's also a good man, a kind man, a smart man, and a man I am very pleased to be able to call my friend. I wish you and Elena and your new book, Shaking the Skies, all the best of every success.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those great words. Kevin,
Shall I
you're gonna
introduce
give Giovanni-
myself?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Kevin Doan, and for about a decade, I was the aerospace correspondent of the Financial Times. My decade started slightly earlier than Giovanni's decade at IATA, but pretty much they covered the same period of time. Now, I'd had by then already a couple of decades behind me in business journalism, and I had a very, very firm idea of what I thought about trade associations, whether national trade associations or global trade associations. That was essentially that they moved normally at the speed of the lowest ship in the convoy. It was the lowest common denominator. The poor general director or CEO of a trade association really didn't stand a chance. He was, or she would be, completely dominated by the big egos of the industrial sector, the chief executives. And as we all well know, they don't like their stage being usurped by somebody. Now, somewhere in probably late 02, early 03, the rumors started that perhaps actually there was a new broom at IATA. There was, God forbid, the possibility that IATA might actually prove to be an exception to the rule. One heard about this new sort of force of nature that had arrived. Now, as I say, I'm pretty skeptical about most things. Professionally, it's my job to be skeptical. So I stood back to wait. And then gradually, over the years, I got to know Giovanni. But, Giovanni, go back to 2002. 2002, it's a trade association, for God's sake, comes calling. In the book, you describe it as a dinosaur of an organization. You call it prehistoric. Why the hell did you take the job?
Kevin, you're right. You know, I love challenges and changes. And I was living a great experience in Opodo, in London, as Nick kindly just presented. But I was concerned because I knew also IATA. I was on the board of IATA for many years when I was in Alitalia. And I said, when Leo Malin called me, and then it was the first call, I didn't know Leo Malin. And I told her, Mr. Malin, I'm not the right guy for this organization. I'm coming from a different kind of school. My boss is Jack Welch. If I arrive in IATA and implement GE techniques, it will be a revolution. And I said, thank you very much, but I'm not the right person, and I'm enjoying my life in Geneva, in London. After months, he called me again. It was December. Giovanni, we will give you a white sheet of paper. You have to lead a revolution. This industry is dying. Most of the US airlines were in Chapter 11. And so I asked a couple of weeks to think it over. And I went, when you have a big decision to take, you try to have advice of a good mentor, a good friend. And I flew to New York, and I spent a weekend with Jack Welch. I said, Jack, what do you think? I'm not the right guy for this association. He said, Giovanni, you have a unique opportunity. The industry is dying. Just go, push hard, and implement what you've learned in GE. I asked just one thing to Jack. I would need Noel Tichy spending some time in IATA. Noel Tichy is the dean of the business school of GE, the famous Cottonville. And unfortunately, I could not pay because IATA had $1,000 for training for the entire year, so it was not affordable. He said, Giovanni, having Noel Tichy in IATA is like putting a bomb in a church. I said, Jack, that is what I need. I accepted. I arrived in IATA. It took me 1 month to explain what I was doing, to speak with everybody, saying we are setting targets. Management will be A, B, and C. A, the good. B, what has to improve. C, out. And it worked.
Could you have done it without 9/11?
No. Probably no, because it was such a difficult job. You know, I said, I don't have here, I have a team of chickens and I need lions. And what do we do? And I had given the power to change everything. I think so in the first 8 months we changed 30% of the staff.
And can you describe for us the nature of the staff that you found there? Because I mean, now you have one description in the book of there being those with the silo experts and the Club Med
Yes.
types, right? Now I think the Club Med type speaks for itself, but you know, what did you actually find when you got to the organization?
You know, we had a lot of respected managers who were not able to be promoted in their own airlines and were sent to IATA to spend the last 3 or 4 years of their career in a very nice and pleasant organization.
So it was a retirement home.
Retirement, yeah, wonderful. The target was how many meetings with the airline have you had? Logically, who is dealing with Air Seychelles got an incredible bonus because it's quite fun. And that was the atmosphere. And
so you put a bomb in the church. What do you mean by that, putting a bomb in the church?
You know, I changed all what was normal for IATA. And implementing techniques that in GE was normal. But for an IATA organization, for example, just to give you an idea, easy thing. Comes the CEO, we handle an enormous amount of money. Comes the CEO, the CFO to my office and say, you know, they're calling me DG, we have a big problem. We have all those Club Med that are traveling around, we lost track of them, and we don't have neither the receipts back when they return. That was a problem. I said, I solved it in 22 minutes.
For doing their expenses, you mean, their
Yes.
receipts, right?
And they're traveling all over. I said, you cancel immediately all the credit cards. Some took 25 days to return home. But that worked much more than a letter. It came to me, the head of HR, the first person that I met when I had to start it. And I said, we discussed before, well, let's start. He said, yeah, you're right, but for this reason, we cannot be implemented. And you know, DG, IATA has never fired somebody in all his career. Okay, you are the first one to be fired from today. Tomorrow it's your
funeral. So what was the scale, by the time you'd got to perhaps the middle of your term, what was the scale of the staff change that you actually implemented in the organization?
You know, the first year we changed 35%. When I left it, out of 1,500, I think so there's 100 people left. On the other side, I must say that I was given full mandate to change everything. I had a great board, and Robert just mentioned, but they were not interested in the organization. They wanted to see IATA delivering something. So I could be fast, speed, passion, and commitment. That was the leitmotif for everybody. And I interviewed nearly all the managers that were joining. And I see a colleague, Kevin. Kevin Dobie. I always had, I would say, a small meeting with my senior management to evaluate the candidate that we had to hire. Once I missed that meeting and I returned the meeting the following day, I say, what was it, who did you meet? How did it work? And I said, oh, it's easy. We hire the best. And Kevin stood up and said, Giovanni, it's the first time that I hear this. We've always saying, let's hire the cheapest one.
Okay, now, the motto when you joined was what? We represent and serve?
We represent and serve.
Okay. Now, you say in the book that you introduced another word in there, and it was to represent, lead, and serve, yeah? Now, on your board, you've got all the egos, the Robert Miltons of this world, right? And many others that we all know and so dearly love. How on earth did you manage to lead with those sort of personalities around in the industry?
You know, first of all, when I said represent, and I said we have to include one word, lead, nobody really paid a lot of attention. It was just one of those leitmotifs that you put in the advertising magazine. But after they started to understand that I was serious. On the other side, airlines understood that I was starting to deliver. Because 3 months after, when I joined IATA as a CEO in July, in 2 months, I reshaped part of the organization. And on December, I was already in Narita. And so the airline saw, this guy is serious. This guy is serious. And also, for example, just to give an example of airport represents 10% of the total cost of IATA, $50 billion a year, just to give an idea of what is it. Just to give an idea, I say, okay, I'll start with the airports. And I asked the team, I say, okay, how do you manage? Negotiate. Well, we go and we discuss with the airport, and we present our case, and they say that's impossible because it doesn't work. And what's the follow-up? The follow-up, the Director General of IATA writes a nice letter to the minister, and the minister answers a very nice letter, documented, and said, this cannot be done. And what happened? It's over. And I told, no, I'll go there. I'll go there. No, DG, don't go because what can you do? I'll go there. You know, my experience running the Erie division was very helpful. I knew exactly how to hit in what.
This is essentially the Italian state-owned holding company.
It's a big Italian state-owned company that owns Alitalia and 500 other. And I was dealing there when there was a big meeting between Alfa Romeo and Nissan. So I knew where to put the stick. And I knew that embarrassing the Japanese government, the Prime Minister and the Crown Prince there was something that was effective. They all left, and Robert told the story. So the board members, so this guy is starting to deliver. Why bother him in the kitchen?
Early on, you went for a couple of big, high-profile victories, or battles at least. You didn't know whether they were going to be victories. Narita and Toronto Airport. I mean, why did you choose those? I mean, why did they stand out as...
Narita was the most incredible situation in the world because I had problem with Narita when I was in Alitalia 15 years ago. So it was a story that was going out forever. So it was an icon symbol. Logically, when you identify an icon, you take a risk because you try to hit hard. But you know, when you have to give the example, you have to risk and succeed. There was no plan B.
What do you think made Narita turn around and give you that very key early win that established some credibility for you early on?
But you know, I embarrassed Narita in all the newspapers in the world. And I told to all my colleagues, you know, when you go in any party, speak about Narita. Narita became a case study. And so at a certain point, they understood that if they wanted to privatize Narita, they had to start to behave.
I mean, how much did you know at that time about, say, the Japanese culture? Because you're stepping into one of the perhaps most conservative, rigid business hierarchies, and you start acting in that sort of fashion.
But you know, the 10 years that I spent at Erie at head of the international division was very helpful. I was dealing with the steel industry, with many companies. I knew very well what was going around the world. And that is probably one of the reasons that convinced Robert Milton to make the first call.
Okay. Now, you Giovanni is an inveterate networker. I mean, there are... Rod Eddington is another one. I mean, I am somewhat in awe of people that manage to put together such extraordinary networks around the world and keep them fresh and keep them in touch. So before you ever got to IATA, you'd essentially been putting together a network of people around the world. Now, one of your operations in Erie that they eventually sent you to was to be CEO of Alitalia, right? Yeah. So at Alitalia, you're essentially the Pope's airline. Yeah. Was that one of the best contacts you managed to make? I mean, getting the papal blessing for your activities? Or?
You know, in fact, the Alitalia is a bit, I would say, the national carrier of the Vatican. And we enjoyed very much assisting the Vatican. But in a certain moment with John Paul II, you know, he was coming from Poland. He didn't understand a lot the service industry, but yes, the metallic stuff, the hard work thing. And I told him, we are losing money. The only thing that we need now is a blessing from the Pope. And so we were able to put together on December the 10th, it's my birthday, but it's also the saint that overlooks the aviation, to have him in Fiumicino was 100 airlines blessing this industry. But what was very funny, and that's a funny story on the Pope, and so we were very proud of being the national air of the Pope. And a couple of months after this event, the head of corp communications, Gianni Kelly of of Alitalia, comes to me and says, Giovanni, we have a problem. You know, what's the problem? He said, you know, there's an airline that has offered free flights for the Pope for 2 years. It was a cost recovery, what we were charging the Vatican. We made no money, but we were not losing. And he said, you know, if we lose this fact, it will be a big impact for Alitalia's credibility. I said, no, problem. I have a solution. And I said, what do we do? In 24 hours, you know, when the Pope was traveling with Alitalia, we had a guy that was internal guy from corp communication who was filming all the Pope. And he said, in 24 hours, you have to give me a video, an advertising video all on the Pope. 3 minutes just on the Pope. I said, what? Yeah, we'll be using it in the television. What? So we had 2 minutes of the Pope saying, Alitalia is the best airline in the world. The food of Alitalia is perfect. When I have lunch here, I feel at home. And so on, so on, so on. And he said, okay, I said, do this and call Stanislaw, Monsieur Stanislaw, who's now the Cardinal of Cracovia. Send them this video with short notice. I understand that you have to make your decision because this is business, but in order to compensate the loss in credibility that we have, we will use this in its sole feature. Stanislaw called me after 2 hours and said, are you crazy? No, why? But the funny story is that a month or 2 months after, I was flying the Pope to Houston, and he said, he was calling me Direttore, you have never done it, but those guys believed that was possible, and so they were so scared, and they didn't tell me anything.
How did Mother Teresa try to get a free ticket?
Mother Teresa is another strange story, and I had a telephone call early in the morning from the Italian Prime Minister who passed away a couple of days ago, Andreotti. It was the only call that I received from him. It was early in the morning, and it was in one of the first mobile phones. And I hear that he was asking me to meet in the afternoon a lady, Teresa something. And I said to my PA, look, Miss Teresa something is coming in the afternoon. I didn't know for what. I forgot to have a follow-up. And in the afternoon, they received a call downstairs. I said, look, here this Mother Teresa in Calcutta is waiting, and we have 100 people around. What's happening? And so we connected this, and I went down immediately to meet Mother Teresa. She was there with her assistant. She came up, and I was very kind, honestly, because I was very embarrassed for having waited for me. He said, and she was completely different from the saint that you imagine. She said, I need 2 passes for me and for my assistant immediately. I said, Mother Teresa, it's a great pleasure having here. Unfortunately, I cannot give you passes because we give just a pass to a CEO of an airline. But in any case, every time that you fly to India, and we were flying to there, just give us a call and so on. And after a couple of months, I received a nice little card. The funny thing is, 4 or 5 months after, she came again, and this without any kind of telephone call in advance. And I was in a board. She came up, and I told me, I always say to my PA, just come in the board just if we have an accident. So she opened there, and I said to the board, I'm sorry, but it's something very serious in a plane. So I went out, and Mother Teresa said, I want you, please, to give, every time that a plane flies into India, to give all the food that you have not used and to Mother Teresa Calcutta Charity Association. I said, yes. I presented this when I was chairman of European Association to all the other airlines. Colin Marshall helped a lot, but we were not able to achieve it for internal reasons.
One of the things that comes across as when you listen to Giovanni talking is obviously his skill in communications. One of the wonderful things over the years of attending IATA AGMs was to see the way that he gradually upped the ante at these meetings, and to watch how increasingly outrageous the poster presentations became during these meetings, and then to listen to him wielding this wonderful Italian word, basta. Now, Giovanni, tell us a little bit about just how non-existent the idea of communications was at IATA when you arrived, and how you started to turn that around.
You know, at the first board that I had, immediately after the AGM, when I was appointed in Shanghai, I returned to Geneva and I asked corporate communication if we had any cover. And it came out 2 little postcards, no, this size of a couple
of the annual meeting.
Of annual meeting. I said, wow. At the next meeting that I was there, I said, we always say that the world doesn't understand our problems, but it's our problem to explain to them. We keep everything secret. Nobody comes to our event. Next time, it will be showtime. And it will be showtime, so in Washington AGM, Robert may remember, I had Lou Dobbs with CNN, and we presented a great panel, and people were surprised to see a different IATA, but to start understanding what was the real problem of our industry. And it was not the problem of IATA. It was problem of what affected the entire world. We make the global village a reality. We handle 3 billion passengers a year. Instead, we were silent in our problem, silent in our requests.
So what did you decide to try to do to raise the profile? I mean, tell us a little bit about these AGM presentations and how you arrived at the rather outrageous posters that you eventually arrived at.
You know, the AGM became a big event. We have 1,000 people, 300 journalists, 20 television covering it. Because it became a show. But a show, you see, a show presenting figures and facts. You cannot just say nice words. You have to nail the audience, pointing at figures and facts. And sometimes the visual, the slides helped a lot. I remember in Singapore, we were having a big battle with the GDSs, something that I'm quite familiar as I was chairman of Galileo in Korea for many years ago. And I'm very bad in drawings. And so when we prepare the AGM speech, I handwrite the text, the basic text, and after I put on the side certain kind of images that I would like to see. And when we were attacking the GDSs, I want a big face of a man with 3 leeches. And our very good guy, Richard, comes with the 3 leeches. I said, it has to be more impressive.
Richard was the designer inside
IATA. The inside IATA. I said, I want something more. Put blood with the leeches. And after I came back for the 3rd try, I said, look, I want the blood, but I want the names of the GDS. Amadeus, Galileo, Trump. And in fact, Richard arrived, but he was assisted by the corporate secretary of IATA, Tom, and was our general counsel. I said, what's going on all of this group of me? He said, no, DG, this we cannot do it because we will have a legal case. I don't care. Go on and have it. And the most pleasant thing is, immediately after 2 days, I received a call from an icon, a guru of an industry, Herb Keller, the founder of Southwest. He said, Giovanni, I know that you had a slide and I want a poster, a big poster, because I will put it in the back of my office.
Tell us, Giovanni, the media can be a two-edged sword. Have you ever had any regrets about opening up IATA so much to media scrutiny? And I suppose I'm jumping ahead here, but I'm thinking through to your final AGM, and you've been in there for 10 years, and inevitably you get bruised by battles over 10 years, and you don't please everybody inside and outside the organization. Now that final AGM was pretty hard work, wasn't it? Do you have regrets at all about the exposure you've put the organization to?
I think so that the communication was a very important tool. Also because, you know, when you go and see a minister, but the day before he has seen your picture like this in the Toronto News, he received you in a completely different way. And on the other side, yeah, we had problems many times, but the value of presenting our case was so strong because we have a great story. We made the global village a reality. There's no other mode of transportation safer than aviation. We've changed the way in which you travel. The tickets has gone down. We are trying to battle the hassle that passengers have now because of this crazy kind of system. But the proposition of aviation is incredibly good. So the advantages are much higher than the eventually negative sides.
If one were to look at your decade plus a couple of years, you go back to the beginning of it, and the airline industry financially was on its knees, could hardly break even at $20 a barrel oil. Fast forward to today, what have we got? The industry, a lot of it is on its knees, still can't make its ends meet, a financial basket case still. What went right, what went wrong that we are still in that pretty dire position today, despite all the work that's gone on in the decade?
I think so. We've done a lot because practically when I started, we could break even with the fuel at $25 per barrel. Now we can break even with the $110. Incredible. I would say fuel efficiency. All the numbers that you see are incredibly good. But at the same time, this year, we will have roughly $660 billion, $10 billion of profit, 1% of margin, 1.6. Peanuts. If you look back in the 60 years, we had 11 trillion, and the margin is 0.3. So something is not working. We've done a lot, but it's not enough. Can we do more? Yes, we can do more, but there's not many. There's other players that have to do something. And we have a sin that I will try to explain after. The other is mostly the government. Now, Europe and United States have been the backbone of the Chicago Convention, are now lost with no leadership. Look here, for example, this wonderful country I love. Look what's going on. $5 billion, the highest tax in the world. London Heathrow. It started with a discussion in '71, Roskilde. After 30, 40 years, we're still discussing. We have lost leadership in Europe. And so one of the issues is government must try to understand that we are important. Try to change the rules of the game. The rules of the game mean, for who is not very familiar with this industry, if I want to fly from a place to another, I need an act of the parliament to agree on a route. This was okay 60 years ago, but now it's nonsense.
But Giovanni, you had 10 years there, you had your decade, and yet in many areas we're still talking about the same problems 10 years on.
And I tell you something, yes, you're absolutely right. And so the biggest problem that government do not understand this, and they are really, we had one chance, and it's in the book, to changing those rules. And it was when Secretary Peters was Minister of Transport and Minister Frattini was the European Council Vice President. I was there, it was not my role because it's government, but I'm in a certain way the facilitator. And I had convinced Secretary Peters, who is a good friend of senior President Bush, the two of them were from Texas, to take this great opportunity and open everything. She called me and said, Giovanni, I spoke with President Bush. It's okay, because we will do the Delta deal, and at the same time, we will have open skies and ownership. Unfortunately, the information leaked out. The European raised it, and Oberstar said never. Oberstar is the chairman of a very powerful committee in the Congress, and so in that moment, we were able just to achieve the market access.
And so, I mean, do you think we're ever going to get to a situation where you can have global consolidation in the industry?
You know, in order to have global consolidation, that is what we need those ownership rules to be. Look, I'm not confident on Europe and on United States. They have lack of leadership. They are lost on aviation. I hope that now, who is the biggest player in the world now in aviation? We still consider ourselves Europeans or Americans the leader. It's Asia. Asia represents 44% of the total market. They have built 25 airports in the last 6 years. And from here to 2050, there's 50 airports.
China.
They've done everything right. And in 2015, Asia will become a one market. Asia is not China. But I still hope that in order to make a big change, we will have to wait for those countries that, in a certain way, Asia, China, that could play a role.
I mean, you clearly need help from government in many of these areas. The thing that struck me through my decade of following the industry was that it was fantastically good at shooting itself in the foot. And the thing that above all it was totally incapable of controlling was capacity. You know, and it would bleat on about governments this and governments the other, and all of the providers and everybody else that's making the world a mess for them. But actually, they're making a mess of their own industry a lot of the time.
That is what I mentioned before, and I mentioned this the first time, because if I would mention this during my yard, I would go through big trouble. There is one big sin that is killing this industry, and it's capacity. It's capacity.
Now, you'd have ended up in jail if you discussed it
Exactly.
at IATA.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can explain
Yes,
why that would
That's
be.
it.
Or
we cannot handle pricing or capacity. And I made just a small photo of this year. I said this year we have $600 billion, $10 billion of profit, and we will make 1.6. Now, what is the situation of the industry as a whole? We have $650 billion of investment in this industry. In order to reward the capital, we would need to make $50 billion a year. Now, this year, 2013, if we could have cut capacity by 6%, we would achieve an 8% return, keeping the yields in the actual situation. So this gives you an idea that this is a big problem, but this you have to leave it, you have to ask and I must say, for example, the US in the last 2 years has been more wise. And that's the reason why it has improved. It's something that is difficult to achieve because we have different kinds of airlines. In my times, many of the airlines were subsidized, directly or indirectly. Now we have certain airlines that are in a certain way directly linked with the government, let's say the Middle East, and most of the others are in the market. So this doesn't help this overall situation. But in any case, I would say have we become a bit wiser. The other thing that we have to be careful in order to have this equation correct is that we keep control of the distribution. Because I was mentioning before, the yields must remain the same. But if we lose control of the distribution, and the distribution of a seed becomes like the freight, the situation doesn't work. But that's, on the other side, I think so that it's time for airlines to realize to be a bit wiser in handling capacity.
Okay. If we come back to IATA, which after all is it's not the only part of the book. There's lots of other great stories, especially Giovanni's life before he ever got to IATA. But come back to IATA. You were described as shouting politely. Clearly, you also shout impolitely on some occasions. And you were characterized by having had the crazy ideas. Now, when you look back at that decade at IATA, what do you think were the craziest ideas and the most extraordinary ones that you actually got to bear fruit?
But you know, all the three crazy ideas were the big pillars of IATA of today. Because when I started with electronic ticket, you know how it started. It started, and we have Philippe Rouillet, who was the head of the team. We started because in a conversation with some CEOs, I was saying, okay, we have made some profit this year. It was 4 billion, something like that. We have to celebrate. I said, guys, how we can celebrate a 1% margin? We make a celebration of 1% margin. 1% normally you get sacked. Instead here, everybody's in its own position. I said, let's do something. And it came out that I was telling, Robert may remember this. He was there. I said, because we had SARS, we had downturn of the economic, and we have this. And somebody raised their hand and said, you forgot the low-cost airlines. And I said, guys, low cost is competition. Competition we have to face and win. And I said, I'm working on something in order to use some of the tools of the low cost into IATA. And my experience there was Opodo and with the GDSs and with the great team that I put together, but at the beginning it was an impossible target because we had to get rid of 400 million tickets. At the same time,
of paper tickets, the old tickets, that all the vouchers that we used to travel with. Yeah.
We had, this is a copy of the last paper ticket. We had to get rid of that incredible amount of, we had to change 20 legislations in 20 countries because it was, you had to have a paper in order to enter in at the airport. You had to do it at the same time because we couldn't have two systems running. And remember that IATA is not just the big guys. IATA, we had Mongolian Airlines, Air Koryo. And my job, also, you know, because something that I want to underline because it has been very important, also if I was running IATA's GE, I didn't forget of the small airlines. I flew every time that there was a problem. And I was able to help in a very simple way. You know, IATA, we had the fees, I would say, the dues. When I arrived, we had money for 1 month and we had a mortgage. I said, okay, this is an association, I have to help the small guys. We'll start making money. You are known for profit, you cannot make money. Well, you know, I'm not going to pay a dividend, but I need money to help our small members to get on board. And so we built a process and a system that we had $200-300 million a year from consulting, things like this. So I was confident that we had the capacity of helping those small little airlines around the world in getting on board, sending some teams, not giving money, sending teams for 1-2 weeks, and we had also CETA that was helping us. And that was very important in order to make those crazy ideas a reality.
Can you perhaps just tell us how much the saving has represented for the industry of moving to electronic ticketing?
We have the number, electronic ticketing. We started simplifying the business. It was a program with electronic ticketing that was the biggest actor. After we had the self-service kiosk and the mobile phone. Those two programs together saved the industry $59 billion in 10 years. It was 5.9 billion. And made the travel experience much more pleasant. You cannot lose a ticket, doesn't exist.
Everybody says, and I'm sure we all do believe in it implicitly, that safety has to be the number one target of the industry. Now, one of the issues that you took up during this time, your time in IATA, was the safety issue, and the introduction of IOSA, the operational safety audits. Perhaps just tell us a little bit what sort of Damocles you came to wield over the airlines by introducing IOSA, and tell us about your experiences in Nigeria, because that is worth retelling.
You know, in IOSA, I was reading, first of all, we always discuss in the industry that safety is the number one priority, and we all agree. And at the same time, there was a report from Boeing, and you may remember at the end of in the 90s, traffic is increasing, the level of accident will increase, and the number would start to hurt. So I said, let's see what we can do. And I said, why don't we build an audit program for all the other airlines, elevating very high the level of safety. Board, Robert was there, he was chairman, and that was, Giovanni, we will lose all the African airlines. I say, we will lose all the African. I said, look, guys, we will try to help as much as we can, everybody. With this, go teams. So we're not forgetting. We put together a team, and we worked closely with the government, because at the beginning the government was not very happy that IATA was starting to interfere in something that's very governmental.
Because the government set safety standards. I said, but look, I'm going to raise the level, and I have an advantage. If I raise the level for all the IATA members, the world will be much safer, because a single government can raise the bar on each national airline, but not on that one on Nigeria. It worked. And now the biggest satisfaction is that now not only all the IATA members were on board, we had to drop 23 airlines at the end of the process. But now also many governments are requiring IOSA. I say, and this happened when the Minister of Transport of Egypt, Shafiq, you may remember that there was two incredible, terrible accidents of two charter planes flying into Egypt on a Christmas. There were hundreds of people died, and he called me, he said, Giovanni, I want to implement IOSA as a national requirement of the Egyptian government. And now we have 35 nations. The biggest satisfaction last year. Last year, 2012, there was 0 hull loss rate in the whole IATA world. How difficult was it getting the message over in Nigeria?
Nigeria was an incredible story. Nigeria, you know, we didn't have a good relation with the Nigerian government. And there was an accident. I wrote a letter to the president, received a normal answer. There was another accident. Nigeria had an accident, a fatal accident with 200 fatalities every year for the last 10 years. I received an answer. He said, well, come over, let's see to discuss. We went over, we discussed, we saw what was going on. And the problem is that there were many airlines that officially were carrying passengers, but the passenger was just something irrelevant because they were carrying drugs or arms. That was the main reason of the business. And so we had to celebrate an event. And so there was a very good lady, Minister of Transport, who is now the Minister of Energy. I said, Giovanni, we have to do a big event in Nigeria. Yeah. We go there. I arrived I was flying there. I was with Elena in Madrid. I had lunch with Conte, who was the CEO of Iberia. He said, Giovanni, why I'm going to Nigeria because we have an event today. He said, Giovanni, don't go there. It's very risky. I said, look, but I go to Kabul. I go to Baghdad. I've been all around the world. But that last day before yesterday, the station manager of Iberia was shot on the way to the airport. I arrived there in Nigeria. Very comfortable, very relaxed. Before arriving at the gate, the plane stops, comes up the Director General of the Ministry and an officer of the. He said, Mr. Bisignani, we have to tell you that we found a plot with some bombs that were looking to kill you. It's a very serious thing. We have identified 10, but there's still 5 or 6 missing. But you can be absolutely relaxed because we have an impressive kind of system assisting you. Go there. I arrived down. There was 8 van cars, I think so, 40 or 50 Secret Service. And I was going from one place to another and so on. Tony Consul is not here. Tony Consul is our head of communications. And he was telling me, DG, but why I'm always in the first van? I said, no, come in my van if you're more relaxed. The hotel was completely empty. I slept for 2 nights. Every 2 hours I had to change bedroom and so on. After the last day, and we were informing, the police were informing the way, our way in order to open the road.
To get back to the airport?
To the airport, yes. Mm. And that day, before the airport, we were going to a visit to see an airline with the minister. And the minister was there. I said, but you have not been able to close the road. I said, well, how long? It's 1.5 kilometers. I said, okay, take risk. Tony said, no, I stay here with the journalists. And in fact, we had a big press conference. I arrived there, 6 van, after 5 minutes, it's like Baghdad. I had this big, tall red that jumped on top of me. He started shouting that I was really scared. It went on for, I was told 2 minutes. I thought it was 15 minutes. Yeah. And then it stopped. What happened? We got stuck in the traffic lights. And so the police didn't know what to do, and so ordered to all the policemen that were in the other van to go out and start shooting in the air. And so everybody left the cars there, everyone disappeared, and we were stuck in a traffic jam for half an hour.
We are running out of time, Giovanni, I know, but perhaps just finally, give us a little sense of where you think one aspect of the industry may be going now in the future. And namely this checkpoint of the future. What do you see our experience may start to become as we try to get through the airports of the world?
Well, I'm optimistic. For who is a passenger, I'm very optimistic. You know, security was completely different from safety. In the sense, in safety, we work as a teamwork. Security, when I went the first time to speak with Governor Chertoff and Ridge, Mr. Bisignani, security is 2012. Security is a national problem. You cannot get involved. I said, but look, it's related to the air industry. After the things changed completely with the Obama administration, I had several meetings with his chief of security, Brennan, who is now the head of CIA. I explained this. He introduced me to Janet Napolitano, and it was completely
the Secretary
of Homeland Security. It was a different world. We explained to them, I said, look, if we go on with this system, in a couple of years, we will have the passengers queuing outside in the parking lot. And the passenger is not supporting airline, our business, because when they get on board, they're already hassled by this, take off the shoes, the computer, and so on. So we worked a lot, and we came out with this solution. I'm not a good designer. I said, look, I want something where you arrive, you put your passport. This information goes to the airline and to the security system. And it gives you A, B, and C, depending on if you are reliable or not. And in front of you, you have 3 tunnels, 10 meters long. And you walk in the tunnel 1, 2, and 3. Tunnel 1, it means that you're completely clear. You walk in this tunnel without taking away your shoes, your liquid, your salt. You just walk with your briefcase, and in this tunnel, you are scanned. Now, this is now possible. The big issue, as she said, the checkpoint of the future has been now agreed 2 years ago by Homeland Security. We have many companies already involved. The first checks will be in 2016, and I think so by 2017, 2018 will be, the cost for this is $40 billion. The cost of this inefficient system is $40 billion for Homeland Security and $7 billion for the airline. So this is an unfinished issue, but on its way to be solved.
What happens if you get sent down Tunnel C?
You have problems.
You have problems. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. I've run out of time. I shall
Thank
pass
you.
over to my
Thank
colleague
you,
Max.
Kevin Dunn, former aerospace correspondent at the Financial Times. And now we have here Max Kingsley-Jones, the editor of Airline Business, who is going to be taking questions from the audience. Max, it's all yours.
Thank you, Nick. Just a few words of introduction. I'm the editor of Airline Business, have been for 3 years, and Airline Business, during the time that Giovanni was Director General at IATA, got a very close relationship with IATA as part of this drive that Giovanni introduced at IATA to communicate with the outside world. Very pleased to say that we started producing a small daily newspaper at the event about 6 years ago. We now, the issue that will be coming out at Cape Town will be 40 pages on each day. So we're very, very thankful for that relationship, and it goes from strength to strength with Tony now. I have a question actually, but I'll wait till I throw it open to the floor first. I'll get some questions from the floor. I just thought it's very funny when Simon mentioned earlier in the intro that this building used to be occupied by bankers, given your opinion, Giovanni, of the fact that the airline industry should be a charity with the margins it makes. I thought that's kind of ironic that the Aeronautical Society lives in a building that was once occupied by bankers. Anyway, I'll just start so I can see anyone who's got their hand up. If you could, we have microphones in the room, so you could wait till you get a microphone. And if you could say who you are and if you represent any organisation. I'll go with Malcolm, just here.
Malcolm Ginsberg, Business Travel News. Giovanni, you've been in London, you're a Londoner, 20 years. We have a problem in London. What's your answer to it? If you were the head of the Davis Commission, as hopefully everybody knows here, is trying to solve the 40-year-old problem, what is your answer, please?
Port capacity.
Capacity.
Yeah.
Capacity. Unfortunately, as IATA as a system, there's nothing to do. Let's say, one possibility in a certain way. You know, you have all those routes coming in, etc., and you need governments, to give you a green light. So, in order to be sure that everybody is on a level playing field, before granting a new route, I would say, okay, I would like to send the auditors, to check if you're handling this in a correct way. If you're handling this as a normal airline, okay. If you are subsidized in a certain way, I will keep an eye on it.
Giovanni, I think the question was more about the specific problems in the UK, infrastructure, what the hell do we do about getting more runway capacity? Is that right?
So,
yeah.
So on capacity, we've tried everything. I remember going to Secretary Hammond. He was at that time Secretary of Transportation. I said, Mr. Secretary, he's a very pleasant person. We had a very great conversation. I met him a couple of times. I said, look, Heathrow has to be solved. It cannot be like this. And I told him, look, I love this country and I'm returning here after retirement. This is a country that has built aviation. Simon told us of the history of this club. It reflects the history of aviation and the role that UK has played. But we are losing competitiveness. We had 230 route destinations. We have 200. In a couple of years, we'll be 150. We have lost, and we have lost most of our manufacture. The only thing is the financial sector. If we lose also the connectivity, we are dead. And he said, Giovanni, the only thing that this government is not able to do is to agree on a third runway. And if you remember, when Prime Minister Cameron, immediately after having achieved his position, with his deputy, outside of Downing Street, the only issue that they mentioned is there will not be a third runway. So what can I tell you? I think so it's difficult. I'm happy that the new commission of the recent was, what's the name, Louise?
Howard Davis?
Yes. Agreed that capacity is necessary. But I also see, they agree that it's necessary, but they will decide on 2015. It seems a bit like when I was in the European Association of Airlines, we had a problem there because we had delays. And so I said, okay, every passenger, and please, we were providing a postcard in every seat of the passenger. It was 90 or 91. We had all the airlines of the European Association. We had collected, 1 million of postcards. And after And Colin Marshall was upset because his minister was upset, and we all were upset, and it worked. And also, I received a call, and I went to see the president of the European Commission, and Van Miert, who was the commissioner. He said, Mr. Bisignani, why are you doing all this mess? And he gave me a book, and it was A Single Sky, and he said, the single sky will be a reality in 95. And I have the photo. So what I'm saying, unfortunately, in this part of the world, we don't see leaders able to explain why we need a runway.
But Giovanni, do you think the answer is 2 new runways at Heathrow or Boris Island out to the east? What do you recommend?
Let's speak of serious stuff. Let's leave the island for shipping. But also Boris realized that we need just one. It was a provocative. Also because, if you want to build an airport on an island, I think we have to sell pieces of UK because the cost would be incredibly high.
Thank you. I have a question here.
Harry Dole from India, from Aviation Watch. It's such a pleasure listening to this debate, unlike some of the other debates we listen to, and it's an honor to listen to you. You mentioned Homeland Security. My question is, as IATA, when you look at security arrangements in countries which are, shall we say, are less developed in their security techniques, and those aircrafts are flying into Europe, they're flying into the United States, what is the kind of regime that you put in, what kind of audits that you put in? I know you said safety and security are two different things, but they affect each other. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
On safety, we handle the situation in the sense that the airline has to be audited to be an IATA member. On security, it's not a problem. It's a problem of the national government who underlines and sees this. Logically, who is playing a certain level of role in this is also ICAO, who monitors, I would say, the civil aviation and also this kind of sector. But we are just responsible on the safety where we can really implement or check the status quo of the situation.
I think there's a question at the back. There's one there.
Thanks. Hi, Julie Meyer, Ariadne Capital. I run a venture fund. And I'm fascinated. It's been really fabulous to listen to you. But I guess my question is this a big company industry, the airlines industry, or are there opportunities for entrepreneurs to change the airlines industry? Other than being Estelia's, where you start off with maybe 600 million of your father's money, is there for normal people ways that they can set up new businesses and change the airline industry? And to what extent do you think that technology will change and solve a lot of the problems that the airlines industry has? For example, in security and all those long lines of people coming through, it seems that technology should be able to help us here.
So,
I would say on technology, I think so that on security, I think so technology will help. The technology is there, and I think so we have also a target time that we will be able to achieve also because it's a target of the companies. The great thing of Homeland Security is that Gianni Napolitano said something very simple. I'm not anymore buying the old stuff. From now on, Homeland Security will buy this kind of equipment because that makes a difference. On entrepreneurs, I always say if you are a billionaire and you want to become a millionaire, step in the industry. If you see who has made money in the industry, there's not many. Some of our friends, because they entered and left in peaks. On the other side, today, it's, I would say, to reshape an industry today, a company today is very difficult. It's easier to start something from scratch. And you see and you see what happened in the low-cost industry. The low cost was, as I mentioned before, very positive because they anticipated what was the customer's need. We understood nobody wanted anymore to have a meal because everybody was on diet, and we were putting flights with meal from Rome to Milano, an hour and a half. Why? Because we had 1,000 people in the back court and we didn't know what to do with them. It arrived the low cost and say, we just do what is in the interest of the passenger, decrease the cost. So I still believe that in the low-cost area, you still have a certain kind of opportunities.
Do you think on that, you mentioned a couple of airlines, Stelios,
Yeah.
Tony Fernandez, they came from outside the industry.
Yeah.
Do you think there's too much of an insular approach taken at the network carriers to, if it's kind of like a big goldfish bowl and everyone just swims around running airlines and then moving to another airline, whereas these really successful new airlines are coming from outside with best practice from other industries?
You know, when you come from outside and you have a crazy idea that has a certain kind of management kind of project, we too many times, you know, because inside the industry you have too many experts that are always thinking in the same way. So they're going like this for 20 years, and if you say diversify a bit, I say no, this, and they're very good in explaining why. In those time of explanations, sometimes are very interesting to hear, but try to just look ahead and find solutions.
Do you think the industry has enough appeal to these guys from outside to come in? It's too restrictive still.
You know, it's not easy because you need a certain high level of capital. The risk is high. And honestly, if you go to a bank, see, normally when you start a business, you have one third, and one third. One third is from the bank. When you go to a bank, you say, okay, what's your track record? No, I'm starting from scratch. Okay, what's the track record of the industry? The industry has never made money in 60 years. So how can I lend you money to start something that has a very high level of percentage of unsuccess?
Any more questions? Right, one just there.
Hi, Giovanni. Chika Miyoshi from Cranfield University. I have an easy question to you. And first of all, congratulations for the publishing your book. And Cranfield University, we are producing a future leader for the aviation. So your book will be one of the important Bible for the student. So would you have any words or suggestion to our student to be for the next generation airliner, aviation people, to be the successful or to survive in the aviation industry?
What does it take?
You know, I think so. One thing I can say, I don't know if they will make money or no, but because that is really, it's a really difficult question, and I don't want to raise any kind of expectation to my friends in Cranford. But when I go there, I have to say, Giovanni, what suggestion have you given to me? The only thing what I can say, and I've been in banking, in university, in banking, in shipping, in internet, the most fascinating place where to work, it's in aviation. The atmosphere that you have in aviation is unique. Is unique. Probably because there is a certain kind of tradition that aviation started dealing with safety. And with safety, there's no barriers. It's all open. When you go in an airport and another airline needs any kind of technical assistance, also if there are tough competitors, the other airline is there to assist. So go to aviation because it's a wonderful atmosphere and he will or she will surely enjoy living that kind of life.
Do we have any more? There's one just at the back on the left.
Robert Davis, Cass Business School. So you've got another question from a business school. You've led change during times of great environmental uncertainty, which is exactly where we are now. Could you just give one piece of advice generally to chief executives?
I would say it's difficult, but the two main elements or three main elements, you have to have a team. You have to put together a great team because if you don't have a great team, it doesn't work. Try to get them involved and try them to transfer your passion, your commitment, and your speed. And speed is very important in today's time.
Vicky?
Victoria Moores with ATW. Giovanni, your life hasn't quietened down that much since leaving IATA, but you have had a little bit of time to sort of take a step back and look back at what you did before. I was wondering if there's anything that you've learnt since leaving IATA that you wished that you'd known while you were there?
That's a tough. Probably, sometimes you have to balance speed with decision. Speed with decision. Sometimes I missed. Well, I give you several examples. Mistakes. For example, mistakes in handling people. I think so that I'm very good in handling people because I've always done this. But sometimes you make mistakes. I made a mistake, for example, 2 big mistakes in this. When I had to launch a program, I had to identify a key person to play that role. For example, in the case of simplifying the business, I said, look, it has to be somebody with a certain kind of drive. And so I found a very good CEO in a US airline. I brought him on board. I saw after 2 months he was not the right person because he didn't have the speed, the passion, and commitment, but I was very fast in changing him. So probably sometimes spend a bit more time, but I did not have time. And so I had to take those risks. But if you take those risks, you have to be very fast in evaluating that you've made a mistake and changing.
Thanks. We've got time for 2 more questions, I think. So, lady here, just behind Vicky.
Hi, sorry, thank you. My name's Dina Salmon from Cranfield University. Just wanted to get your thoughts of potentially new laws of operating leases being part of the balance sheet for airlines.
New laws, huh?
Well, potentially new like accountancy for operating leases of aircraft to be on the balance sheet for airlines.
Well, unfortunately, yes, we can handle things on the balance sheet. The problem is that we have to solve the basic problem. We have to start making real money because our problem is this business doesn't produce enough money, not to repay the cost of capital, but that's just to do an insignificant kind of margin. My risk and my concern is when IATA, probably not many know that we are the biggest client of any bank in the world. IATA in 10 years, my 10 years, I handled $2.5 trillion cash. Cash. And Robert knows sometimes the problem that we had when we had to suspend an airline or when after the Lehman Brothers, and I was quite comfortable because we handled that quite well. We had a very high number of, and I was telling to the board and whoever, your money is safe. Why? Because the travel agents, that is our travel agents, we have a guarantee, so there's no problem. On the airline, we have a security deposit. The security deposit covers I would say, the tickets of 2 weeks, something like this. I said, and after a certain moment, I received a call a week or 2 weeks after September 11th. One of my first jobs was in Citibank. And so all my colleagues in IATA always knew Citibank. You have to motivate the people with great people with whom I had worked, Citibank and Jack Welch. And so at 3 o'clock in the morning, I received a call. It was a friend of mine from the States. And he says, Giovanni, there are rumors that Citibank could go out of business. What? We manage this enormous amount of money, but we don't keep it many days. We keep it for, depending on the different routes, 2, 3, 4 days or a week. And I gave a call to our CFO, who was Bob Hutt. It was 3 o'clock in the morning in Geneva. He said, Bob, look, I have this call, and I know from where it comes, so it's a reliable source. He said, Giovanni, we have $5 billion in Citibank. 3 o'clock in the morning. That was probably my toughest decision there, because I had to decide what to do with this money. We took away $2 billion and we kept it free.
And there's one question here, this lady just here.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Candler, Cranfield University. You spoke about deregulation and regulation, and we still have one highly regulated but yet very fastly growing aviation market, which is the sub-Saharan African market. Do you see a chance of deregulation there in the next 10 years?
I hope so, but what I hope more is that in that part of the world, safety has to become a number one priority. Because with all those measures that we have taken, with all the efforts, when you see those numbers in Africa, it's still of great concern. So their regulation, yes, but safety is the number one call for the African continent.
Giovanni, I know that we're about to end. I have one last question for you. You touched upon this when Kevin was speaking to you. The Gulf carriers, you mentioned the Middle East. Do you think they are going to eat everyone's lunch? Are they going to leave any food for the rest of the world? Is it all over, or will it be all over in 10 years?
But I mentioned before, in my time, we were all in a certain, my times in Alitalia, I would say, we've all had a certain level of subsidies or assistance. Now you have this incredible situation of the Gulf carriers that are handling very well. Infrastructure, great. Taxes, very low. Efficiency, very high. Now, I had many times colleagues coming, but these are subsidized. They don't pay fuel, they don't pay this, they don't pay this. No. I, as IATA, cannot be the auditor of what's going on. Now, the only audit that could be, as I mentioned before, if you want to enter in a market, the government could send an auditor, Ernest, one of those experts, to check if the balance sheet is correct and decide yes or no. On the other side, I also mentioned in my old times in IATA that I would like to see this issue handled not anymore by governments being advocates or supporters. I would like to see airlines starting to do business decisions and trying to find a way to cooperate in a different way. Something has started to work. We started to see Etihad, that has open relationship with Air France, Emirates with Qantas, and I would like to see this handled as a normal business, in a business way, without calling the auditors or without calling the governments.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much for the Q&A. We have Giovanni will be around for afterwards if you want to pick anything up with him further on after this. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Giovanni will be signing copies of his book up front here. We also have drinks outside. I thank you all for coming. And for those of you who have flown back here, have a safe flight back home. Thank you very much.